Every week, I provide access to authentic documents from closed archives. There is no artistic fiction here. If you're watching this, it means the material has already breached the system. We assume no responsibility for what you learn. Subscribe. Knowledge is irreversible. This story happened in 2012 and split my life into before and after. But let's go in order. My name is Alex. I work in one of the offices in Chicago. To put it simply, I'm a typical guy from the provinces renting an apartment, working 5 days on, 2 off, and only coming home to sleep. Soon I had to help my grandparents with the harvest. They basically raised me after my parents died in a drunken house fire when I was 5. I reluctantly took vacation time and headed back to my hometown. The village is about 120 miles from the city, so I won't describe the trip. Nothing interesting happened. I arrived late in the evening. Stepping off the stuffy bus that smelled of gasoline and people, I greedily breathed in the spicy aroma of freshly cut grass. I threw my bag over my shoulder and walked down the painfully familiar street. 10 minutes later, I was standing on the porch of my childhood home and finally hugged my old folks. "God, I missed you so much," I said with a smile. "We last saw each other in spring, but it feels like a whole year has passed." "We missed you too," Grandpa replied. He was a sturdy, stocky man with a thick gray beard and kind eyes. "Look at those sunken cheeks. Aren't you eating it all over there?" Grandma, small, a bit shorter than my shoulder, round-faced, was already bustling around. "All right, drop your bag and come to the table," Grandpa said, scraping his stool. I didn't need to be asked twice. I sat down and looked around. The house was exactly as I remembered, cozy, warm, and clean. The walls were covered with pictures and old photographs. In the most prominent spot stood the queen of village homes, a large white wood-burning stove. Grandma was hurrying back and forth, covering the table with more and more homemade food from her endless supplies. "How's life in the big city? Is that stone jungle still standing?" Grandma chirped. She used to teach Russian language and literature, but despite her efforts, those subjects never came easy to me. I tried not to embarrass myself, but my diploma still had solid C's. "Yeah, it's standing. Where would it go?" I chuckled, loading my plate with boiled potatoes and butter. "What's new with you? We haven't seen each other for 4 months." "Oh, we've had enough drama here to make any big city writer jealous," Grandpa said, pouring homemade moonshine into shot glasses. "Even Lovecraft might have taken notes." "Lovecraft?" I asked. "Doesn't matter. The point is, you'd be surprised," Grandpa grinned. "Come on, let's drink to your arrival." Grandma looked at him meaningfully. "You didn't forget anything, did you?" Grandpa smiled and poured her a glass too. "There we go. Much better." We clinked glasses. Grandpa drank first, winked at me, and stroked his thick beard. I followed his example. The strong drink burned pleasantly, leaving a spicy aftertaste of field herbs. Grandpa's moonshine was always excellent. I'll admit, sometimes I sold it to colleagues at a fair price, better than cheap store liquor, and it gave the old folks extra pension money. Everyone won. "So what kind of drama have you had?" I asked, smiling as I took a bite of pickled mushrooms. "You remember Nick, the tractor driver? Big, clumsy guy, always dropping tools," Grandpa began. The image of a heavy-set man in old overalls immediately came to mind. "He burned to death, poor soul. Lord forgive him." Grandpa crossed himself. "Let's honor his 40th day." We drank without clinking. "How did it happen?" I asked. It was evening. We were finishing up at the workshop. Nick was outside tinkering with his old tractor. We heard screaming and ran out. He was trying to put out the flames on himself. His overalls were soaked in oil. Grandpa paused, clearly struggling with the memory. The guys ran for water. Nick rolled on the ground yelling, "Water! Water!" One worker grabbed a canister from the shop and poured it on him. Turned out it was gasoline. Nick went up like a torch. We watched his clothes melt into his skin blister and burst. When we finally found real water and sand, he was already gone. Grandpa poured the last of the moonshine. We drank in silence. Grandpa sighed heavily, the memory clearly weighing on him. "Let's go smoke," he said. The evening air outside was cool and carried the distant barking of farm dogs. Moths swirled under the porch light. We lit cigarettes, and the sharp smell of tobacco filled the yard. But even that couldn't completely chase away the stench of burnt flesh that still haunted me from his story. "That smell, it follows me even now," Grandpa muttered. "Every time I close my eyes, I see Nick's screaming face." A sheriff's car had shown up later. The investigator was aggressive and suspicious of everyone at first. "We thought he might arrest all of us," Grandpa admitted with a bitter smile. The next night, the worker who had poured the gasoline, his name was Sammy, hanged himself in the outhouse with his own belt. His wife found him in the morning. In the end, they pinned the whole thing on him, said he did it out of personal grudge, and then took his own life in remorse. "Wanted to help, but it turned out like always," I said, flicking the cigarette butt into an old can. Grandpa stayed quiet for a moment, then looked at me sideways. "Maybe you should visit your parents' grave while you're here." I shook my head. "They didn't suffer. You said yourself they were drunk and fell asleep. Smoke got them, not the fire. Let's get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a busy day. We'll stop by the cemetery to pay respects to Nick, too." 10 minutes later, I was lying in my old room, trying to fall asleep. Eventually, I managed it. I woke up to the alarm I had forgotten to turn off. Warm summer sunlight poured through the window. From the kitchen came the quiet voices of my grandparents. I pulled on a t-shirt and jeans and joined them. After tea, Grandpa suggested, "We'll drink 100 gramov for Nick at the cemetery, then hit the garden." It was a perfect, calm day. No wind at all. We drove the old but reliable pickup truck along the dusty road toward the cemetery on the edge of the woods. Our local cemetery was special, surrounded by thick forest. While Grandpa and Grandma tended to things, I decided to walk around and remember my childhood. We used to climb among the old, weathered headstones overgrown with grass. My attention was caught by one very strange grave. There wasn't a single blade of grass around it. Everywhere else the cemetery was green and overgrown, but here the grass and weeds formed a thick wall around a blackened, sunken mound covered in last year's leaves. A crooked wooden cross leaned to the side. I stood there puzzled. Then Grandpa called me, and I hurried back. Later I realized I must have dropped something there, but at the time I didn't think much of it. Back home we had a quick bite and got to work. That day I hauled firewood, fixed the shed, and spent hours bent over in the potato field pulling weeds. By evening, I was exhausted. After supper, we talked about the day's chores. I was worried about the weeds that had taken over the garden. Grandpa fought them in the raspberry bushes, and Grandma had some accident in the kitchen. She burned out the old electric kettle. We laughed it off, replaced the kettle, and went back to work. After dinner, I collapsed into bed and fell into deep sleep immediately. I woke up in the middle of the night. I was standing in just my underwear at that same blackened grave. The outlines of headstones and fences were clearly visible in the moonlight. What a dream, I thought. Suddenly there was a cracking sound. I looked down. The rotten wooden cross lay at my feet. Something was crawling out of the grave soil. I can't describe exactly what it was. I stepped back, then ran as fast as I could. An inhuman groan came from the earth behind me. I didn't make it far. I tripped and fell, one foot sinking into a hole. Something cold, strong, and sticky grabbed my leg from below. The stench was suffocating. I screamed. Behind me came a wet, dragging sound like stakes being driven into the ground. I turned and nearly died of terror. A real corpse was shambling toward me, moving through the broken bones of its own skeleton. With enormous effort, I freed my leg and ran toward the village, limping, refusing to look back. The village was pitch black and deathly silent. No dogs barking, no lights in any windows. I rushed to our house. Inside, by candlelight, sat skeletons with scraps of flesh, skin, and clothes. My grandparents. They seemed to be talking. but their voices sounded muffled, as if through cotton. They all turned toward me. Their eyes glowed like cat's eyes in the dark. I tried to step back, but fell. Everything went black. I woke up gasping, heart pounding. Bright, sunny day outside. I exhaled in relief. What a nightmare. Then I froze. My feet, the sheets and blanket were covered in dirt. On my ankle was a clear bruise in the shape of human fingers. At that moment, Grandma walked in. "Oh, Alex, you're already—" She gasped, covered her mouth, and sat down heavily on a chair. "Where did you wander off to last night? Your feet?" I told her everything from the beginning, about the strange grave and the dream. She listened in horror. "We need to go to Granny Melanie," she said firmly. "She's a healer in the next village. She's helped many people. She'll know what to do." Grandpa was already chopping wood when he saw me. He stopped mid-swing, staring at my muddy legs and the bruise. "Alex, what the hell happened to you?" I had to tell him the whole story too. He examined the marks on my ankle carefully. "Something really got to you," he said quietly. "Don't worry. Granny Melanie will sort this out. She works miracles. Folks around here rarely go to the clinic anymore. They go to her. She doesn't take money, just accepts whatever people can give. Help around the house, food, whatever. She heals almost anything with near-perfect results." Later that day, Grandpa drove off to bring Granny Melanie while I sat by the pile of chopped wood, thinking, why had I agreed so easily to see some old healer? Maybe I was losing my mind from work stress, but how could I explain the dirt and the fingerprints on my skin? Was I a sleepwalker? I dozed off without realizing it. In the dream, I was sitting in our yard on a hot summer afternoon. Everything looked normal, the house, the porch, but the front door stood wide open, filled with unnatural black darkness. Something moved inside, like thick soot crawling out. It began eating away at the doorframe, spreading black cracks like a spiderweb. A voice called my name from the darkness, repeating the same words over and over like an old, distorted cassette tape. Then it warped into something inhuman. A wet, slapping sound came from inside, and a head emerged, more like an elongated dog's skull with 2 rows of yellow, crooked fangs. "Why didn't you let your grandma help you, Alex?" A voice rasped inside my head, sounding like a chainsaw mixed with pain. I fell to my knees, clutching my head. The creature crawled out, something vaguely dog-like but twisted, with legs bent at impossible angles, a snake-like body, and glowing red eyes. It leaped toward me. I woke up shaking. Grandpa was standing over me, shaking my shoulders and slapping my face. "Alex, wake up, snap out of it." Beside him stood a tiny old woman in a black, shapeless robe despite the warm weather. Granny Melanie. She said nothing at first, just stared at me, then motioned toward the house. We went inside. She sat on the old couch while I took a stool. "You dropped something where you shouldn't have," she said calmly. "How do you know that?" I asked, surprised. "Doesn't matter. What matters now is how to get rid of what's following you before it drags you to the other side." She explained in a serious voice. "The thing that came for you is called a Deadwalker, not from heaven or hell. They escort sinful souls to purgatory, ancient bones that take over graves. Soon those graves turn black and dead. You paid for the crossing somehow, and now its job is to take you to the other side by any means." I sat there stunned. I had always been a firm atheist, but now... "What should I do?" I asked. "You need to catch it, or rather, make it fail. Here." She handed me a strange stub of a candle made from pig fat mixed with diesel. "When the Deadwalker comes tonight, light this. In its flame, you will become invisible to it, but it will still try to scare or lure you. Everything depends on your willpower. If it fails to take you in 2 nights, it will die." Granny Melanie stood up. "I'll come back this evening. Remember, it's all in your hands. Don't forget to light the candle." My head was spinning. A few days ago, my life was normal. Work, home, beer and chips on weekends. Now everything was falling apart because of one stupid walk through a cemetery. The day passed in chores. In the evening, the sky turned black with heavy clouds. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Granny Melanie arrived just as it started getting dark. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain. Grandma started preparing candles. Power outages were common here during storms. We ate supper in tense silence. Then the rain began hammering the metal roof. I looked out the window. Suddenly, a power line sparked with a loud pop, and the whole house went dark. "Damn it," I cursed, reaching for the special candle. At that moment came the sound of breaking glass from the back of the house, my room. The single candle stub was still burning there on the desk. The stench of burning and thick smoke filled the air. I heard a voice from nowhere. "Come, from the rotten graves, from ancient burial mounds, from the damp earth to the hemp noose. Come." It was getting clearer, and it sounded like Granny Melanie's voice at first, then distorted. I started choking on the acrid smoke. The last thing I saw were burned, blackened hands reaching for me. I came to on the floor, gasping for air. Grandma's worried voice called from the darkness. "Alex, what happened?" They helped me up. I lit the candle. Grandpa and Grandma started lighting other candles around the house, while Granny Melanie sat at the table, reading from a small old book. When we returned to the table, something was sitting at the far end opposite Granny Melanie. We all saw it now. It held two blackened, soot-covered heads. My parents' heads. "Look who came for you," the creature said in a voice woven from hundreds of human sobs and unbearable pain. "Don't be shy. Your mom and dad missed you so much. They came to take you home." The creature rose from the table and moved slowly across the room on twisted, interlocking limbs. It was heavier, more solid now. I stepped forward instinctively, shielding Grandma and Grandpa, pushing them closer to the big wood stove. The candle in my hands was melting fast, growing strangely heavier as the wax dripped. The creature spoke again in that voice made of pure suffering. "They've missed you so much." I stood frozen, barely breathing, trying not to make a sound. Then I felt hands on my elbows. Grandma on one side, Grandpa on the other. Their touch should have been comforting, but the candle seemed to gain even more weight. Only 2 centimeters of it remained. I was already mentally saying goodbye to my family when Granny Melanie's sharp voice cut through the horror. "You won't take him. Leave this place." The creature turned to her with a hideous grin, yellow, crooked fangs flashing. "Old friend Melanie, they've been waiting for you on the other side too." It lashed out with a clawed paw at the wall, hissed furiously, and vanished into thin air as if it had never existed. "Is it really over?" I asked, voice shaking. "Yes, little one, it's over," Granny Melanie replied. "Dawn is almost here." Indeed, the sky outside was already growing lighter. The candle in my hands finally went out. We sat there in stunned silence until the sun rose. A month after those terrible events, my life seemed to improve. The constant anxiety left me. I worked better, had more energy, and started visiting my grandparents much more often. I also helped Granny Melanie around her house as payment for her help. Life was returning to normal. But that was only what I thought. One quiet evening, while driving back to the city after another visit to the village, I felt an unnatural calm. The road was empty. In the rearview mirror, I suddenly saw 2 familiar figures in the back seat. My parents, exactly as they looked in old photos, smiling gently. "You finally came home, son," they whispered. I smiled back, feeling warm and safe for the first time in years. The car kept moving forward, but I no longer felt the steering wheel in my hands. The road ahead dissolved into soft, warm darkness. The next morning, the police found my car wrapped around a tree just 10 miles from the village. There were no brake marks. The coroner said I had fallen asleep at the wheel. My grandparents buried me next to my parents. Only Granny Melanie knew the truth. The Deadwalker hadn't left. It had simply changed its method. It won. And somewhere in the old cemetery, one more grave slowly turned black, with no grass growing around it.